All right, it looks like we are recording here. So this is the next section of our final review. Okay, today. Oh, I think I forgot to share my screen. Where's my Zoom? Get back to my Zoom. Ah, there we go. Did I share with you guys? Let's see here. I'm glad I caught that. So I did not have a video where it was literally just me. That would have been really bad for you guys. Now let's take a look at culture and communication. Again, this is the third section for your final project. You're going to do a great job with this, guys. I am going to give you all that you need in this short little video segment. You're going to have highlighted review that tells you exactly where to go to find the best content for your final. The key is, are you going to start early enough to review and revise and realize that that writing process is one of the most important pieces if you do a paper? If you do a PowerPoint, you're going to want to make sure you have great graphics. As you can see on the screen, I kind of get to cheat. AI does a lot of the designing for me on this. Thank you, Ivy Tech, for the wonderful resources with the souped up version of PowerPoint that is absolutely phenomenal, honestly. So we are now going to take a look at the key terms that I highlighted on the final review. Remember, you're gonna want to evaluate a TV show or a movie, something that's easy to do here at the end where you can watch it several times and really apply the key terms. I want you thinking about low context culture and high context culture. This came from Edward T. Hall in section 6.3. I left some blanks for you. So I'm going to give you a little time to stop, think. How much do you remember about that? Could you name all the characteristics of a low context culture and a high context culture? Could you apply it to your own state? We are going to talk about low context culture and high context culture throughout the state of Indiana at one point in this. So hopefully you can apply that a little bit here as you're going through it. I will give you the definition right about now. Now, you want to realize, remember that as you are doing your final, you want to make sure that you have internal citations throughout the text, and they need to be in APA style. Sometimes when you guys get really tired, I will see MLA creep in. Guess what? I did that when I was your age as a brand new undergraduate writer. I know it's hard to learn how to switch between the two styles. Honestly, now it's really hard for me to go back to MLA because I teach communications courses at the college level and the high school level. My masters have been in education and in communications, and they both use APA style. So now my wife's getting her master's in composition and rhetoric through IU. And guess what? I have no clue how to do MLA in comparison. So yeah, it's something you have to really pay attention to the style guides, use the help that is there. So really, there's a lot to this. Now, our book mentioned low context culture in the form of Switzerland, highest context culture Japan, with the US in the middle, but leaning towards low context culture. So for us, what exactly does that mean? Now, low context cultures tend to be less polite, more verbal. They're explicit, direct, and even can be considered confrontational by somebody in a high context culture. You will also learn about me doing silly things when I've been forced into situations by my own choosing. A about being in a high context culture when, as you'll learn later, I come from a part of the state that probably has one of the more low context cultures. Now, Wrench also wrote about Hall's theory and tells us that high context cultures are implicit, nonverbal, more meaningful, and more polite. We'll get back to the weird facial feature that I just made in a second. It's actually not weird, and you'll understand why I went in a second. Now, when we talk about Indiana's cultures as both low and high context cultures, I grew up in Northwest Indiana, which is just outside of Chicago. People are often in a rush. When I say a rush, I mean they are hustling and bustling and moving. I now live in the northern suburbs of Indianapolis, and I can tell you that Indy goes at a much better pace for me in my life. I really love it here. It's still fast. It is still hustling and bustling in comparison to, let's say, where my wife grew up. She grew up in a small town called Delphi, Indiana, and it is teeny and tiny as far as population. Everybody knows everybody, and they kind of expect you to know the rules coming into it. So they would be a much more high context culture than where I grew up in Northwest Indiana. But I've also fallen in love with that place as well. So anyone out there in a small town, thank you for those beautiful high context cultures that make our state known for our hospitality. Um, Now, it's funny because I'm forced to sort of code switch between multiple different subcultures within Indiana. I feel myself becoming more confrontational, more direct when I go home. And in fact, it probably leads to some interesting communication patterns whenever I see my brother, my mom and dad, friends from high school, etc., that have always been there versus when I'm either where I currently live or when I'm in my wife's hometown. Now, when we talk about cultural intelligence, I'm going to talk about a time in my life where I really grew in this realm, but it was a very high context culture, and I missed a lot of subtlety coming from a low context culture. It can be quite difficult. I've also met some people from low context culture countries, and they are very direct to the point where they can make me blush sometimes with things they'll say. There were some Scandinavian individuals on a tour that my family took one time, and they said some things where I just sort of shook my head and nodded and kind of went with the flow because I was like, oh, that's just a cultural difference. Now, cultural intelligence is the individual's capability to function effectively in situations characterized by cultural diversity. I love to travel. I'm often in different cultural places where I have to kind of figure things out. My mentor is incredible. She's actually been um, in military communications, communicating with people in Afghanistan, Iraq, etc., which those are completely different cultures than anything I've ever experienced. I'm starting to get a lot of students in my in-person classes from those areas, so I'm starting to learn more about those cultures, but I still have a long way to go. Now, this slide is very boring. It should jar you. The reason I did that was I want you thinking about if you're doing a PowerPoint for your final, be sure that you kind of stick to a similar style, that you don't really jar the viewer. I'm going to be honest, I'm really bad at that. I'm really good at shaping a message when it comes to writing, where I can revise and really shape it. When it comes to the visual element, there's something in my brain where I kind of struggle. So the age of AI will definitely help out this Aquarius. There's a bad pop culture reference to some great 60s music there. I hope you guys picked up on it. If not, I'm old. It's okay. Now, there are four factors of cultural intelligence: cognitive CQ, motivational CQ, metacognitive CQ, and behavioral CQ. I'm about to talk about all of those now. When it comes to cognitive CQ, this is knowing about different cultures. They also use the term intercultural knowledge in the textbook, and I have a book about who were the Navajo code talkers up because I had a chance not just to meet a Navajo code talker, but to work with one. And I did not know that book existed till I was looking for an image. So my kids will be reading this book shortly. They read all the history books, they are absolutely into it. And I will have a chance to tell them about a man that I worked with in a school cafeteria named Key. Remember when I did this? That is actually a way that Navajo people can point and ask you to get something. It is not something I fully understood when I went out there. I took a year's worth of cultural classes in Navajo, learned some basic Navajo phrases in order to work out there. Loved every second of it. Part of me going out there in student teaching was that I had to work in the cafeteria, and that's where I met Key, who would often point to things. He did not speak English at all, so for us to communicate, it was very good that he came from a high context culture because he was really able to express himself using body language in a way that really helped me out. I was not the first IU student teacher to go there. There are lots of IU student teachers who do that. It's called the AIRP project. I believe Dr. Stikowski still runs that. So if there are any future educators out there, you can actually student teach all over the world. My wife did so in New Zealand, so that's just an awesome opportunity to promote IU as well as the great programs that come through Ivy Tech. You can be a part of that program whether you start on campus or at Ivy Tech and transfer over. Now, cognitive CQ, knowing about different cultures. When I went out there, I thought I knew so much about their culture. And guess what? I was really motivated to know everything I could about Navajo culture. Um, I would watch different movies. I would read every book I could get my hand on. We had to do research projects for a year before we went out there about history. Um, and one of my research projects was on the undeclared war between the Hopi and Navajo Nation. It was a really cool project. Got really scary one time uh, when I was actually actively involved with students. So now, motivational CQ. Ooh, that did not look that way in my preview. So again, be sure you run through things before you present as well. Motivational CQ, the degree to which an individual desires to engage in intercultural interactions and the ability to easily adapt to these different cultural environments. There is a great movie on Netflix called Resball, and it's actually about the town of Chinle. I student taught in Pinyon. You don't see Pinyon at all in the movie, but the only place my cell phone would work in 2005, these are the old flip phones, so I'm sure it's way better now, was underneath an A&W root beer sign in the town of Chinle. But basketball is very important, much like in Indiana, to the towns on the reservation. High school basketball is a cultural event. There are people dressed to the nines in their traditional attire, beating drums. It is a really neat experience. And I really had a desire to fit in. I knew basketball well. Coached it in high school a little bit during my time in education and absolutely loved it in that stage of my life. And so that was a really cool, really neat thing. But I also desired to learn more about the rest of the culture as well. And the degree you desire to engage in these interactions, the more you want to learn about others, the easier it is to sort of get people to open up when you are not a member of the dominant culture in your area or when you are simply exploring a new place. Um, there's a great book by Cialdini, Robert Cialdini, I believe is his name, called Persuasion, and there's one called Persuasion, and it is about how to basically get people to do anything that you want them to do, how to set up the environment, and how to actually persuade them. And one of the rules in that research is that if you like people first, and if you interact with people first, they will want to interact with you. They will want to learn from you, and they will want to share information with you. Our textbook discussed the idea of essentially if you disclose something to someone first, they will tend to disclose things back to you. I believe he calls it monkey see, monkey do, because they've done all sorts of experiments to the point of if you think someone's having a heart attack on the street, if the first person interacts to save the person's life, the second person will interact. If the first person avoids helping the person who's in distress, the second person will avoid it. So there's a lot of research around this. So the degree you want to engage and the degree you try to engage will definitely impact how you fit into new cultural environments. So think about that with your own life as you guys, many of you, probably 90% of you are finishing up your senior year of high school. Um, so yeah, next year you will be interacting with a university, depending on where you go, with people from all over the world, people with different cultures, and as I discussed earlier, people from different subcultures within our own state. Now, that really did get a little messy there, didn't it? Metacognitive CQ is, yeah, it doesn't look that way here, but it does on the slide. So I'm going to make this a little bit smaller before we continue, and hopefully it doesn't mess things up too bad. Well, now it's off the page there. Let's see. It's not letting me select it in a way where it's going to let me pull it up. It's just moving it down. Oh no. Tell you what, I'll present without the definition. Metacognitive CQ is being consciously aware, right? Think of this as being culturally mindful. Now I'm over the present button. Sorry about the mess there, guys. I did not anticipate that in the middle of this one. It's okay. We all make mistakes. I'm not going to fix this on the. I don't want to share it. Where did the presentation button go? Slideshow, duh. Sorry. Oh no, I made it worse. Sorry, guys. Another thing to be aware of. Be sure you're previewing. There's another mistake in here that I made intentionally that I'm going to want you to figure out as we go. I'm hoping you guys noticed it because I'm kind of harsh in my comments. I hope I don't come off harsh. I really do enjoy everything you guys write. But I know for some of you at this point in the term, I want to see a lot more connections to the text. So there's something I'm doing here that I did in the previous section that I want you thinking about as we talk about this. Now, think of metacognitive CQ as being culturally mindful, right? You're thinking about these interactions, you're thinking about the rules in different cultures and their norms, and you're adjusting to them with your behavior, okay? We're not quite to behavioral CQ yet, but you're starting to think about it and you're growing in your knowledge of it. Now, behavioral CQ brings up another interesting story about my time in the Navajo Nation. But I forgot to point out on this slide, this is an image of a Navajo sweat lodge. It is a cultural ceremony and I had a chance to do one several times. In fact, the first time they described the rules to me, and I was so nervous that essentially what happens is they heat these rocks up and they're on fire. You're going to sweat out the impurities from your body. It's a lot like a sauna, essentially. And everyone is going to chant something in Navajo. When it's in multicultural experience, they tell you just use your own spiritual tradition so that you can still partake in it. So everyone is essentially praying in Navajo. My roommate and I were praying in English. We were using our own religious traditions, and you had to sprinkle water on the flaming rocks that were so red you could see them. Well, they told me to throw water on it. So literally, I'm hearing tss, 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 after everyone goes around and says what they're doing or says their prayer, the bucket of water comes to me and I literally do what they told me to do, right? I am from a low context culture, but I really want to gain in my cultural intelligence. I literally take the bucket and I heave ho almost all the water out of the bucket. Thank goodness I went last. But we nearly sweated ourselves to death. Needless to say, I was brutally embarrassed in this interaction. And thank goodness they kept inviting me back where my behavioral CQ could change, right? Like I had the desire. I really wanted to know. And my roommate and I, we were both from Indiana. We would get mad at each other if we weren't invited, because we really wanted to be a part of the entire town of Piñon, Arizona during that time. And honestly, um, I'm really glad they kept inviting me back because at the end of that sweat lodge, I was digging my face into the dirt for just some cool air on my face. It felt good to dig down into the dirt. So my behavioral CQ went up significantly after that first manner. I was behaving in a manner that is consistent with what I had learned. But before that, I didn't have a clue what I was doing. Thank goodness these folks were so kind, so polite, and just, took me under their wing and taught me a lot, not just about life, but about humanity in general. When I think back on those times, you know, like Key was such an instrumental part of my time, and our only communication was nonverbal. Um, there was very little verbal attempts between us. In fact, the kids had a nickname for me, say Yogi Nashla, say Yogi Bushish Chi, which means I am a hippie born of the long hair clan. Apparently, a student just made this phrase up, but it went around the town. And when I shared it with Key, he died laughing because I tried to introduce myself to him in Navajo for the first time, and he just thought that was great. Someone could interpret for us and told me that he thought it was awesome how much I wanted to be a part of the town. So hopefully this wasn't too long. I knew this one would be long because I've got a lot of embarrassing stories from all over the world. But today you guys get the Navajo tale of how silly I can be as I try to expand my cultural intelligence and knowing that I come from a fairly low context, fairly direct and blunt culture. So hopefully you learned a little bit more about these concepts from this lecture. I will be back for the next section with a new university shirt on to tell you about another transfer program. I wish I had a polo for every school in the state of Indiana, but I don't.